My name is Hannah Whitmore. I'm 36 years old. And until that Saturday night, I thought I was 3 weeks away from marrying the man I loved. Ryan and I had been together for 3 years. We met at a mutual friend's birthday party. The kind where you don't expect anything important to happen because the music is too loud and everyone is balancing plastic cups on windowsills. He was charming in a quiet way then. Not flashy. Not trying too hard. He asked me questions and actually listened to the answers. We started dating 2 weeks later. He proposed last November. The wedding was scheduled for late June. Everything looked perfect from the outside. The problem was, his family, intensa is the polite word. Loud is more accurate. Cruel. If I'm being honest now, they were the kind of people who called insults, jokes, and called emotional damage honesty. Ryan was different when we were alone. Softer. Warmer. He made coffee before I woke up. He remembered the names of my coworkers. He once drove 40 minutes in the rain because I mentioned I was craving soup from a tiny Thai place across town, but around his family, he changed. He laughed when they made little comments about me. He let them tease me about being too practical, too calm, too careful. If I said something serious, one of his brothers would repeat it in a dramatic voice, and everyone would laugh. Ryan would squeeze my knee under the table like that was supposed to make up for not defending me. I told myself it was family dynamics. Everyone acts different around relatives. Right. That was the lie that kept me there. The engagement dinner was his family's idea. Not the original celebration dinner we had after he proposed. This was a second one because his aunt and uncle were visiting from across the country and apparently needed to properly meet me before the wedding. Ryan said it mattered to him, so I agreed. Because that is what you do when you love someone. You show up, you smile, you try. The reservation was at an upscale steakhouse downtown. Private room for 14 people, Ryan's parents, his 2 brothers and their wives, the visiting aunt and uncle, 2 cousins, Ryan, and me. I wore a navy dress I had saved for special occasions. Pearl earrings my mother gave me when I turned 30. And heels that made me feel taller than I was. I brought an expensive bottle of wine for the table because I wanted the night to go well. I got there 15 minutes early. Ryan's family arrived exactly on time. Loud. Before they even entered the room, Ryan came in with his mother. Looking handsome, in a dark suit, kissed my cheek, and then immediately got pulled into a conversation with his aunt about tux fittings. We ordered drinks, appetizers came, then the questions started. His uncle leaned back in his chair, like he was conducting an interview. So, Hannah, remind me again, what exactly do you do? I'm in software project management. Good money in that. Decent money. I said, I do well. His father tilted his head. Do well how? Ryan looked down at his menu. I answered anyway. I owned my condo. I had a solid retirement plan. I lived comfortably. I wasn't flashy. But I was stable. His uncle made a face. Comfortable. That's one way to put it. The table laughed. Ryan laughed too. It was small. Almost nothing. But I felt it like a pin under my skin. Dinner arrived around 8:15. Steaks. Sides. Another bottle of wine. Conversation shifted to the wedding. His mother went through the details like she was chairing a board meeting venue. Catering. Music. Flowers. Guest count. Then his aunt looked at me and smiled. So, Hannah, are you excited to join this crazy family? I smiled back. Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. Ryan's older brother, Mark, Schmierked. She says that now, wait until she's stuck with us permanently. More laughter. His younger brother, Caleb, lifted his glass. Seriously. Though, you sure you're ready for this? Marriage is no joke. Especially into this family. I think so. I said, I love Ryan. That's what matters. Ryan's father finally spoke after several quiet minutes. Love is important, he said. But marriage is more than love. It's compatibility, partnership, being able to handle real life together. I agree, I said carefully. And I think Ryan and I handle real life well together. He didn't look convinced. Do you? The room shifted. I could feel it. Everyone was watching now. This was not small talk anymore. I do, I said. His mother placed a hand over her wine glass. Sweetheart. His father is just saying marriage is hard. Harder than dating. You need to be certain. I am certain. Ryan still hadn't said a word. He sat beside me, pushing food around his plate, like he was studying it for answers. His aunt leaned forward. Can I be honest? And I mean really honest. My throat tightened. Sure. I don't see it, she said. The words hung there. You too. I don't see the spark. The chemistry? You seem like roommates. Nice roommates. But still. I looked at Ryan. He did not look at me. I disagree, I said. We have plenty of chemistry. His uncle laughed under his breath. Chemistry. She says chemistry. The table laughed with him. Except Ryan. Ryan was staring at his plate. And somehow, that scared me more. His mother turned to him with a soft, almost rehearsed concern. Ryan. Honey, you've been quiet. What do you think? He looked up. For 1 second, his eyes met mine. Then they moved away. I don't know. My chest went cold. You don't know, I asked. He swallowed. I mean, they have a point. Sometimes I wonder if we're really right for each other. You're wondering this now, I said. 3 weeks before the wedding. I've been wondering for a while. The whole room went silent. I could hear silverware clinking faintly from the main dining area beyond the wall. Why didn't you say something, I asked. I don't know. I thought it would pass. I thought I'd feel more certain as the date got closer. And you don't, he shook his head. No, I don't. His father cleared his throat. Maybe this dinner was a good idea after all. Better to figure this out now than after the wedding. I felt like I had been pushed underwater. Every sound became muffled. Every face looked too sharp and too far away. Ryan's brothers were watching me, with the bright-eyed interest of people who had just gotten better entertainment than dessert. I turned to Ryan. So, what are you saying? He took a deep breath. I don't think you're wife material. I'm ending this. Mark laughed first, then Caleb. His uncle smirked into his wineglass. His cousins looked shocked, but not horrified. More like they couldn't believe they had front-row seats. I sat there for a moment, staring at the man I had planned a life with. Then something inside me clicked. Maybe it was the laughter. Maybe it was 3 years of being treated like a punchline. Maybe it was the realization that Ryan had not been pressured into humiliating me. He had simply chosen the safest place to do it, surrounded by people who would applaud him for it. Great timing, I said. Ryan blinked. What? I reached for his hand. The ring was still there. The one I had bought, because he had once said he liked tradition, but hated feeling financially trapped by it. I had laughed then and told him love was not a trap. Funny how wrong I was. He didn't resist when I slid it off. I opened the ring box from my purse, placed the ring inside, and closed it with a soft snap that sounded louder than anything anyone had said all night. Then I stood, lifted my wine glass, and smiled. To better decisions? The silence that followed was almost beautiful. Not because it was peaceful, because for the first time that entire evening, nobody in Ryan's family had a clever comment ready. 14 people sat frozen around a table, covered in half-finished meals and expensive wine. Ryan stared at me. His mother looked horrified. His father's expression became unreadable. "What are you doing?" Ryan asked. I took a slow sip of wine. Then I placed the glass carefully on the table, making a better decision. Nobody laughed. Nobody moved. The atmosphere had changed too quickly. A few seconds earlier, I had been the woman getting dumped. Now, nobody seemed sure what I was about to do. "Since we're all being honest tonight," I said, "let me share something." Ryan shifted uncomfortably. His aunt folded her arms. I continued. "This dinner cost $2,800. A few eyes widened. I paid for it. Silence. "The wine I brought tonight was $400. More silence. "The engagement ring I just took back cost $12,000. Ryan's face lost color. "And the deposits for the wedding venue? Catering, band, photographer, and florist." I smiled. $18,000. His mother looked confused. "What does that have to do with? They're all under my name." That landed. I watched it happen. Like dominoes tipping over one by one. His father sat straighter. His brothers exchanged glances. The aunt who had questioned our chemistry suddenly looked much less confident. "All refundable," I continued, "as long as they're canceled more than 30 days before the wedding." Ryan blinked. "Henna, tomorrow morning," I said calmly. "I'll be canceling everything." His mother gasped. "You're not serious." "I'm completely serious." Ryan stood up. "Wait." "Wait for what?" His father finally rose from his chair. "Now hold on." I laughed softly. The sound surprised even me. "Hold on for what exactly?" No one answered. I looked around the room, at the people who had spent years criticizing my career, my condo, my personality, my clothes, my ambitions, my future, never once asking whether I was happy, never once asking whether I was kind, never once caring about anything beyond what they could measure. "Your son just ended our engagement in front of an audience," I said, "after all of you spent the evening treating me like a joke." His mother shook her head. "That isn't what happened." "Really?" I looked directly at her. "Then what would you call it?" No answer. Ryan finally spoke. "Henna. Please." The word "please" sounded absurd coming from him now. "Please what? I didn't mean for this to happen." I stared at him. "You didn't?" "No." "Then why did it?" Ryan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. For 3 years I had helped him finish projects when he was overwhelmed. For 3 years I had supported every career move, every frustration, every uncertainty, every family crisis. For 3 years I defended him whenever someone criticized him. And now he couldn't even defend his own decision. Because the truth was obvious. This wasn't panic. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This was exactly who he became around his family. A man who wanted their approval more than he wanted my respect. "You couldn't do this privately?" I asked. His eyes filled with tears. "I didn't plan this." "Could have fooled me." His older brother stood. "Okay. Maybe everybody needs to calm down." I looked at him. "Calm down." "Yeah." "You laughed." His face hardened. "It wasn't like that." "You laughed when your brother ended our engagement." Nobody spoke. "You all laughed." My voice remained steady, almost frighteningly steady, like this was entertainment. His uncle suddenly found the tablecloth fascinating. His cousins looked away. Every comment, I pointed around the room, every joke, Then at Ryan. Every time they mocked me, and you stayed silent. My chest tightened, but I kept telling myself, love meant patience. Ryan's eyes dropped. Hannah. No. I raised my hand. For once, you're going to listen. The room froze again. I spent 3 years trying to prove myself to people who had already decided I wasn't enough. I looked at his father. I wasn't ambitious enough. Then his mother. I wasn't exciting enough. Then his brothers. I wasn't successful enough. Then Ryan. And apparently I wasn't wife material. The words echoed through the room. A few people looked embarrassed now. A little late for that. I grabbed my coat from the back of my chair. The movement seemed to wake everyone up. Ryan stepped forward. Hannah. Wait. No. His mother stood. You can't just leave like this. Actually, I said, slipping my coat on. I can. His father moved around the table. We should discuss this like adults. I couldn't believe he said that. Like adults. I laughed again. You mean privately? Nobody answered. Exactly. Because private was what should have happened from the beginning. Ryan could have called me, visited me, taken me to coffee, anything. Instead, he chose an audience. And now suddenly everyone wanted privacy. Interesting. I picked up my purse. Then I looked around the room one last time. Enjoy the rest of your dinner. Nobody moved. It's paid for. A few uncomfortable expressions appeared. Consider it my final wedding gift. I started walking toward the door. Then, I stopped. There was one more thing. One last truth. I turned back. Oh. And by the way, every eye fixed on me. The condo you've spent the last year criticizing. His mother's expression changed immediately. The condo had become one of their favorite topics. Too small. Too modest. Not appropriate for a married couple. Never mind that I owned it outright. Never mind that it had no mortgage. Never mind that it represented years of hard work. The condo you've been pressuring Ryan to move out of after the wedding. Nobody spoke. I'm keeping it. I smiled. Because it's mine. Complete silence. Bought and paid for years before I even met him. Ryan's mother looked furious. His father looked trapped. And Ryan looked like he was finally beginning to understand what had happened. Not the breakup. The consequences. Something to remember. I added, when you're explaining to your friends why the wedding was canceled. Then I walked away. No dramatic pause. No tears. No final argument. Just the sound of my heels crossing the restaurant floor. The elevator ride down felt surreal. The lobby was crowded with strangers, laughing and talking and living normal Saturday nights. I stepped outside. The city lights blurred together. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Not because I wanted Ryan back, because everything I thought my future looked like had vanished in less than 10 minutes. 3 years. Gone. A wedding. Gone. A husband. Gone. I reached my car, unlocked it, sat inside, closed the door, and finally realized my hands were shaking. Violently, I gripped the steering wheel. My heart pounded. My throat burned. Still no tears. Just shock, the kind that arrives so suddenly, your body doesn't know how to react. The restaurant doors opened across the street. Several members of Ryan's family emerged. I immediately looked away. I wasn't interested in watching them process the disaster they'd helped create. My phone buzzed. Ryan. I stared at the screen, then declined the call. A second later, it rang again. Declined. Then his mother. Declined. Then his father. Declined. Then Ryan again. I switched the phone to silent and dropped it onto the passenger seat. The city moved around me. Cars. Lights. People. Life continuing as if mine hadn't just exploded. Eventually, I started the engine. As I pulled away from the curb, one thought repeated itself over and over. Not grief, Not anger, not revenge. Relief. A small, quiet, terrifying relief. Because for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't trying to earn a place in someone else's family anymore. And deep down, I already knew something I wouldn't fully understand until months later. Ryan hadn't destroyed my future that night. He had accidentally saved me from it. When I got home that night, I didn't turn on the television. I didn't pour a drink. I didn't call anyone. I walked into my condo, set my purse on the kitchen counter, and sat on the couch. The silence felt strange. For months, maybe years, this place had been preparing to become ours. Wedding invitations had been stacked on the dining table. A guest list sat inside a folder near my desk. There were samples for centerpieces in a cabinet, vacation brochures for our honeymoon tucked inside a drawer. Every corner contained evidence of a future that no longer existed. I stared at the wall for nearly an hour, not thinking, not processing, just existing. Around 10:45 p.m. My phone started buzzing. Ryan, then again, then his mother, then his father, then Mark, then Caleb, one after another. I watched the screen light up repeatedly, declined every call. Eventually, I powered the phone off completely and went to bed. Sleep never really came. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ryan sitting at that table, not looking guilty, not looking heartbroken, just relieved, as if he had finally said something he'd been rehearsing. I woke up before sunrise. Anam gosongol. The sky outside my balcony was still gray. I made coffee and sat outside, wrapped in a blanket. For a while, I simply watched the city wake up. Then I turned my phone back on. 43 missed calls. 67 messages. I didn't read a single one. Instead, I started making calls of my own. The wedding venue answered first. A cheerful coordinator named Denise. I explained the situation. There was a brief silence. Then she said softly, "I'm very sorry. No judgment, no curiosity, not gossip, just kindness." Within 15 minutes, the cancellation was processed. The refund would arrive within a week. Next came the caterer, then the photographer, then the band, then the florist. Every conversation felt strangely easy, painful, but easy, like removing stitches that had already come loose. By noon, everything was gone. The wedding, the reception, the music, the flowers, the honeymoon package, canceled. Every contract, every reservation, every plan. I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by confirmation emails. 3 years reduced to digital paperwork. My phone buzzed again. Ryan. For a moment, I considered ignoring it. Then I opened a new message and typed, "Everything is canceled. Deposits are being refunded. Do not contact me again." I hit send. My phone rang almost instantly. Declined. It rang again. Declined. Then the text started. "Please let me explain. I made a mistake. My family pushed me into saying those things. I didn't mean it. Please call me. Please. Please. Please." I stared at the screen. A strange sadness settled over me. Because part of me wanted to believe him. Part of me wanted the version of Ryan I loved to be real. The man who brought me coffee. The man who kissed my forehead when I couldn't sleep. The man who told me I was his best friend. But that wasn't the man who sat at the dinner table. That wasn't the man who let everyone laugh. That wasn't the man who called me unfit to be his wife. Choices reveal people, and Ryan had made his choice. I blocked his number. His mother tried next. A voicemail. "Henna. We need to discuss this like adults. You can't throw away 3 years because of one difficult conversation." One difficult conversation. The phrase actually made me laugh. I blocked her. Then came his father. Text. "You embarrassed our family. You owe us an apology. I stared at it for several seconds, then blocked him too. By Sunday evening, every member of Ryan's family was blocked. I went to the gym, worked out until my muscles ached, until my thoughts slowed, until exhaustion finally overpowered heartbreak. That night, I ordered pizza and watched terrible action movies. Not because I enjoyed them, because they required absolutely no emotional investment. Monday morning, I went to work. My coworkers had no idea my wedding had died 48 hours earlier. I answered emails, attended meetings, reviewed project timelines, pretended everything was normal. Around lunch, my boss stopped by my office. "You still planning to take vacation next month?" "The honeymoon. I had almost forgotten. I'll still take some of it." He smiled. "Good." Then he noticed something. "What happened?" I hesitated, then answered honestly, "The wedding's off." His eyes widened. "Hannah, it's okay." It wasn't, but I appreciated that he didn't ask questions. "Take whatever time you need," he said quietly, and walked away. By Tuesday afternoon, I was beginning to think the worst was behind me. I was wrong. The intercom buzzed while I was working from home. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again, and again, and again. Finally, I checked the security camera. Ryan, standing downstairs holding flowers. Of course, I didn't answer. A few minutes later, someone in the building let him inside. Apparently, he claimed there was an emergency. Soon afterward came the knock. I looked through the peephole. He looked terrible. Red eyes, wrinkled shirt, flowers clutched like a life raft. "Hannah." I stayed silent. "I know you're in there." Another knock. "Please." Silence. "Hannah, please talk to me." I stood perfectly still. My heart hammered against my ribs. Not because I missed him, because hearing his voice reopened wounds that were barely beginning to close. I made a mistake. His voice cracked. I panicked. Another knock. My family kept asking questions and putting pressure on me, and I don't know what happened. I closed my eyes. For a dangerous second, I remembered the man I thought he was. Then another memory arrived. The laughter, the smirks, the humiliation, and just like that, the weakness disappeared. "The wedding doesn't have to be canceled," he said. "We can fix this." I nearly laughed. Fix this. As if public humiliation was a flat tire. As if respect could be restored with flowers. As if trust could be rebuilt in an afternoon. I quietly walked away from the door, into my bedroom, put on headphones, turned the music up. For nearly 20 minutes, I could still hear faint knocking through the walls. Then nothing. When I checked later, he was gone. Wednesday brought another surprise. Security from my office called, "There is a man in the lobby asking for you." My stomach dropped. "Who?" "Mark, Ryan's older brother." "Of course. What does he want?" "He says it's personal." I almost laughed. Everything was personal with that family. "Tell him I won't be coming down." The receptionist hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Very." Apparently, Mark waited nearly an hour before leaving. Thursday brought a message from one of Ryan's closest friends. A long social media paragraph. "Ryan is devastated. He loves you. He regrets everything. Please don't throw away what you had." I deleted it. No response. Friday was somehow worse. A handwritten letter arrived in my mailbox. The handwriting was unmistakable. "Ryan." I held the envelope for almost a minute. Part of me wondered what he had written. An apology, a confession, a desperate plea. Then I remembered something. The most important words had already been spoken. "I don't think you're wife material." Everything after that was just damage control. I threw the envelope into the trash unopened. That weekend I started reclaiming my home. Ryan had never officially moved in, but traces of him were everywhere. Clothes, books, toiletries, electronics, small decorations he liked. A coffee mug with a crack in the handle. I filled bag after bag. At first it hurt. Every object carried a memory. Movie nights, weekend breakfasts, holiday mornings, road trips. 1,000 tiny moments. Then, something unexpected happened. The more I packed away, the lighter I felt. Not happier, just lighter. Like removing stones from a backpack I'd forgotten I was carrying. By Sunday evening, 4 large donation bags sat in my car. I drove them to a donation center across town. The volunteer thanked me, helped unload everything, never realizing she was helping remove the last physical evidence of a failed engagement. When I returned home, the condo felt different. Bigger, cleaner, mine. For the first time since the dinner, I stood in the middle of my living room and took a full breath. The pain was still there. The betrayal, the disappointment, the grief. But beneath all of it, something new was beginning to grow. Acceptance. And acceptance, I would eventually learn, is where healing starts. 3 weeks after the engagement dinner, I was sitting at my desk reviewing project reports when my phone rang from an unfamiliar number. Normally, I ignored unknown callers. That day I answered without thinking. Hannah. A Pause. Then Ryan's father. We need to talk. I leaned back in my chair. No. We don't. His voice immediately hardened. You're being unreasonable. Interesting opening. This has gone on long enough. I almost laughed. 3 weeks. 3 weeks of blocked calls. Surprise visits. Messages through friends. And attempts to force conversations I had already declined. Apparently that qualified as long enough. She wants to fix things. I stared out my office window. I don't. A long silence followed. Then, you're throwing away 3 years over one bad night. There it was. The family version of events. One bad night. Not 3 years of disrespect. Not years of insults disguised as humor. Not an engagement ending in front of an audience. Just one bad night. I'm not throwing away anything. I said, Ryan ended the relationship. He didn't mean it. He said it. He was emotional. He was honest. His father sighed heavily. You always take everything so literally. That sentence told me everything I needed to know. People who hurt others often hate being held accountable for their own words. Let me make this simple. I said. Ryan looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't wife material. Silence. Then he ended our engagement. More silence. I believed him. Hannah. No. My voice became sharper. For 3 years. I tolerated being treated like a guest who needed to earn approval from your family. His breathing became audible through the phone. You never gave me a chance. I actually smiled, because that might have been the most ridiculous thing he had ever said. I spent 3 years giving you chances. No response? You just finally ran out of them. The call ended shortly afterward. I blocked the number. Again. That night, I went out for drinks with one of the few mutual friends who wasn't trying to act as a messenger. Her name was Melissa. She had known both Ryan and me for years. More importantly, she wasn't interested in taking sides. She was interested in the truth. We sat at a quiet bar near the river. After listening to everything, she shook her head. The dinner wasn't really the problem. What do you mean? The dinner was just the first time everyone stopped pretending. That hit harder than I expected. Because she was right. The humiliation hadn't started that night. That night had simply exposed it. Ryan's family had always treated me like I was being evaluated, and I had spent years believing that eventually I would pass the test. You know what the saddest part is? I asked. Melissa took a sip of her drink. What? I kept thinking if I loved him enough, he'd eventually defend me. She nodded slowly. People show you who they are. Yeah. You just wanted him to be someone else. That conversation stayed with me for days. Because deep down, I knew she was right. I wasn't mourning the man Ryan was. I was mourning the man I thought he could become. There was a difference. A huge one. By the second month after the breakup, my life looked very different. Work had become busier. I started rock climbing, after a coworker invited me. At first, I was terrible. My arms shook. My hands hurt. I fell constantly. But every climb gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time. Progress. Visible. Measurable. Earned. I also joined a local book club. Started reconnecting with old friends. People I had slowly drifted away from during the relationship. Not because Ryan demanded it, but because relationships consume time. Especially relationships where you're constantly trying to prove your worth. One Friday evening, I was sitting in a cafe reading when I realized something strange. An entire day had passed without me thinking about Ryan. Not once. The realization felt almost shocking, like waking up and discovering an injury had finally stopped hurting. Healing had begun so gradually that I hadn't noticed it happening. Of course, peace never arrives without one final interruption. Mine came on a Tuesday evening. I had just finished a workout when I walked outside the gym and saw someone waiting beside my car. Ryan's mother. Of course, for a second, neither of us moved. Then she approached. Hannah. Isahu. No. Please. No. 5 minutes. I looked around the parking lot. People were coming and going. Nobody paid us any attention. 5 minutes. She repeated, against my better judgment. I agreed. 5. Her eyes immediately filled with tears. That surprised me. Not because I felt sorry for her, because I wasn't sure whether the tears were real. Ryan isn't doing well. There it was. The reason she came. Not an apology. Not accountability. A rescue mission. He's depressed. She continued. He barely eats. He barely sleeps. I leaned against my car, and her expression tightened. And he loves you. The words didn't affect me the way they once would have. Love without respect is just attachment. I understood that now. He should have thought about that before the dinner. He made a mistake. No. Her eyes narrowed. Hannah. No. I shook my head. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is sending a text to the wrong person. A mistake is missing a reservation. She opened her mouth. I continued. Ryan made a choice. The words landed heavily. He chose to embarrass me publicly. He chose to let everyone laugh. He chose to say those things. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. For the first time, her composure cracked. You're being cruel. I stared at her. The irony was breathtaking. Cruel. After everything, I'm being honest. She looked away, perhaps because honesty sounded different when it wasn't aimed at someone else. What about the 3 years you spent together? The question lingered between us. I thought about it carefully. 3 years. Thousands of conversations. Vacations. Birthdays. Holidays. Plans. Dreams. Promises. Then I answered, they mattered. Her face brightened slightly. Until I finished. But they're over. The hope disappeared again. Ryan ended them. Not me. She shook her head. You don't have to throw everything away. It's already gone. The truth finally settled over both of us. There was no grand reconciliation coming. No romantic reunion. No second engagement. No dramatic airport scene. Real life doesn't always work that way. Sometimes people cross a line they cannot uncross. Ryan crossed his mother wiped her eyes, then suddenly remembered something. What about his things? My what? The things he left at your condo? I almost laughed. I donated them. Her mouth fell open. You what? 2 weeks ago. You had no right. That was rich. I looked directly at her. He left them. He never came to get them. It was my home. Her face turned red. I opened my car door. The conversation was finished. Hannah. I paused. For the first time all evening. Her voice sounded tired instead of angry. Were you ever happy with him? The question caught me off guard. For a moment, I thought about lying. Instead, I told the truth. Yes. She looked surprised. So was I? Then, I got into my car and drove away. That was the last time I ever saw her. Months later, I would think about that conversation often. Not because I missed Ryan, not because I regretted leaving, but because it finally helped me understand something important. You can genuinely love someone. You can share wonderful memories. You can build a life together. And they can still be the wrong person for you. Those things are not mutually exclusive. Sometimes, the hardest lesson isn't learning that someone hurt you. It's accepting that loving them doesn't change what they did. And once I understood that, the final pieces of my anger disappeared. All that remained was peace. 4 months after the engagement dinner, I was sitting on a balcony overlooking the Mediterranean Sea. The irony wasn't lost on me. The honeymoon Ryan and I had planned was supposed to take us to a luxury resort in the Caribbean. Instead, I had taken the refunded wedding money, sold the engagement ring, added some savings of my own, and booked a solo trip through Southern Europe. At first, people thought it sounded lonely. It wasn't. It was one of the most peaceful experiences of my life. I spent mornings wandering through old cities with no schedule, afternoons reading in cafes, evenings watching sunsets from places I'd only seen in photographs. For the first time in years, I wasn't adjusting my plans around someone else's family. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I wasn't trying to earn approval. I was simply living, and it felt incredible. Somewhere during that trip, I stopped thinking of myself as a woman whose engagement had been canceled. I started thinking of myself as a woman whose life had been redirected. There was a difference. One version was a victim. The other was free. When I returned home, the changes continued. My condo felt entirely different now. Not because the furniture had changed, because I had. The space no longer felt like a waiting room for marriage. It felt like home. My home, the place I had worked for, purchased myself, maintained myself, built myself. The place Ryan's family had spent years criticizing. Ironically, it became one of my favorite things about my life. Every mortgage-free wall reminded me of something important. I didn't need permission to build a good future. I already had one. Work was going well. 2. Several months after the breakup, I was offered a leadership role overseeing a major project. The promotion came with additional responsibility, a substantial raise, and opportunities I'd wanted for years. The funny part, Ryan's family had always implied I wasn't ambitious enough. Apparently, my employer disagreed. One evening, after celebrating with coworkers, Melissa asked me a question. Do you ever hear anything about Ryan? I shrugged. Sometimes. Mutual friends occasionally mentioned him, not often, and usually only because they assumed I already knew. The biggest update came unexpectedly. Ryan got engaged. Melissa nearly choked on her drink when she told me. What? Seriously? I laughed. Already. Apparently. The story, according to mutual friends, was that Ryan had reconnected with a woman he'd dated briefly before me. A few months after our breakup, they started seeing each other again. Now they were engaged. Melissa watched my face carefully. You okay? I surprised both of us by answering honestly. Yeah. And I was There was no jealousy, no anger, no bitterness, nothing, just indifference. The kind that only arrives when healing is complete. Good for them, I said, and I meant it, because whatever mistakes Ryan made with me were no longer my responsibility. His future belonged to him. Mine belonged to me. That realization felt better than revenge ever could. A few weeks later, I attended a friend's birthday party. Near the end of the evening, someone who knew the story asked the question I'd heard several times before. Do you regret how you handled the dinner? I smiled. There it was again. The question everyone seemed fascinated by. Not whether Ryan was wrong. Not whether his family behaved horribly. Not whether the breakup was cruel. The question was always whether I had been too harsh. Why would I? The woman tilted her head. You embarrassed him. I laughed softly. The answer came easier now, because enough time had passed for emotion to be replaced by clarity. No. What do you mean? Ryan chose to end our engagement publicly. She frowned. So I accepted it publicly. The table became quiet. I continued. If he wanted privacy, he could have spoken to me privately. Nobody disagreed, because there wasn't much to disagree with. The facts were simple. He created the audience. I simply refused to play the role he assigned me. Another guest asked, but don't you think taking back the ring was dramatic? I smiled. No. Why not? Because it was mine. That got a few laughs. But it was true. The ring represented a promise. Ryan ended the promise. The ring came with it. Simple. People often want breakups to follow certain rules. They want the hurt party to remain polite, quiet, graceful, accommodating. Even while being humiliated, I had spent 3 years accommodating. That night, I finally stopped, and I didn't regret it. Not for a second. Several months later, I received one final surprise. A letter. Not from Ryan. Not from his family. From one of his cousins. One of the quieter ones. The cousin who had looked uncomfortable during the dinner. Inside was a short, handwritten note. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. It simply said, I should have spoken up that night. You didn't deserve any of it. I hope you're happy now. That was all. No excuses. No explanations. No requests. Just accountability. Something surprisingly rare. I never responded. But I kept the note. Not because I needed validation. Because it reminded me of something important. There are always people in the room who know what's wrong. Some speak. Some don't. But they know. And deep down, Ryan's family knew too. They knew what happened that night. They knew why I left. They knew why the wedding ended. They just didn't like the consequences. A year later, I barely thought about the engagement dinner anymore. Life had become full again. Friends, work, travel, new experiences, new possibilities. I wasn't rushing into another relationship. I wasn't avoiding one either. For the first time, in a very long time, I was comfortable exactly where I was. Single, happy, peaceful. One evening I stood on my balcony, watching the sunset over the city. The same balcony where I had sat 4 months after the breakup feeling numb. The same balcony where I had wondered whether I would ever feel normal again. I smiled, because normal had returned, then become something even better. I thought about the woman I had been before that dinner. The woman who believed love meant tolerating disrespect. The woman who kept shrinking herself to fit inside someone else's expectations. The woman who confused patience with self-sacrifice. I felt compassion for her, but I wasn't her anymore. The engagement dinner cost me a relationship. It cost me a wedding. It cost me the future I thought I wanted. But it gave me something far more valuable. Perspective, boundaries, self-respect, and the courage to walk away the moment someone tried to convince me I wasn't enough. When people ask me now what the most expensive purchase of my life was, I tell them the truth. A canceled wedding. $20,800 in deposits, reservations, and plans that never happened, then I smile, because it was also the best investment I ever made. I lost a fiancé, but I got myself back.